Alright, what's going on everyone? Lorwyn Eclipsed is nearly upon us, and with it comes 2 new commander decks. The purpose of this video is just to provide a brief overview of the decks. There's 200 cards across the decks, right? We don't have time to go over every single one, but hopefully I can give you an idea of what the decks are doing, the core themes, the core strategies, so you can decide which deck is best for you. And we're just gonna get right into it. Dance of the Elements is our first deck. This is a 5-color elemental themed deck with Ashling the Limitless as the commander. It's a 3-mana 2/3 that says elemental spells you cast from your hand have evoke 4. So if you're not familiar with evoke, we'll show this creature for example. You could pay the full cost, you get the creature, you get to enter the battlefield effect. It's just a normal creature, but if you want to, you can pay the evoke cost instead, which is 2. It's going to enter and die immediately, but you get the enter the battlefield effect, right? So it's either a 5-mana 3/2 kill something or a 2-mana removal spell basically, but you get the creature entering and you get the creature in your graveyard, and there's lots of stuff you can do with that. So when we look at Ashling, paying 4 to evoke, that sounds really expensive, but it can get crazy because Ashling also says whenever you sacrifice a non-token elemental, you create a token of it with haste that you're going to have to sacrifice at the end step unless you pay Wooburg. Now, that would mean you have to pay 9 total to get the evoke and to keep the token, but for 4 mana you can double the enter the battlefield effects of elementals, and we'll talk more about that. It gets kind of crazy. The alternate commander is Massive Mystery. So this is a 5-mana 5/5 first strike vigilance trample that says at the beginning of your upkeep another elemental gains myriad, meaning when it attacks you make additional token copies of it tapped and attacking each other opponent that you exile at end of turn. So once again, this is all about triggering enter the battlefield effects. Just to use our little common, not very exciting one, you could just put a bunch of copies of these, blow up a bunch of stuff, right? And with Ashling, to use this as an example, you could pay 4, evoke it, kill something, it dies, but then you make a token that kills something. So you have 2 mana to evoke it normally, or 4 mana with Ashling to get it twice. So regardless of which commander you choose, you're going to be gaining a ton of value by triggering the enter the battlefield effects of all your elementals multiple times. Now, a major portion of the new cards in this deck are dedicated to an entire cycle of encore elementals. These are all big, they're expensive, and they have very powerful enters abilities that synergize with Ashling. There's 5 of these, all new to this deck. Elementals, 5-color elementals that work with Ashling. So let's use Limitation as an example. It's a 6-mana 5/4 that destroys a creature and gains 3 life when it enters. That's fine. 6-mana 5/4 kill something, gain 3, sure. But with Ashling, you can pay 4, destroy 2 creatures, gain 6 life, right? So 2 mana less, destroy 2 things, get an extra 3 life, don't get the creature. But then it has Encore from the graveyard, and Encore means you can exile it to create a token for each of your opponents. They gain haste, and then you exile them at end of turn. So you can evoke this, kill 2 things, gain 6 life, then Encore it. If you have all 3 opponents, that's 3 creatures destroyed, 9 of life, and you get to attack, right? And then you have things like Belonging and Jubilation. The first makes 1/1s. You can get 6 1/1s for 4 with Ashling, and then Jubilation gives +2/+2 and trample. So with the evoke, that's going to be +4/+4 because each one enters and does the evoke thing, and then from the graveyard you can do that again. And that's the whole idea of like this entire deck. Powerful enter the battlefield effects, and you don't care if the creature dies. So just look at cards like Titan of Industry, Vernal Sovereign, Avenger of Zendikar. You get to choose 2 options on the Titan, right? So if you evoke it for 4, you could get 2 4/4s, right? That's 4 mana for 8 power, and then you get some extra value on the other abilities, whatever you choose. Vernal Sovereign makes a token that has power and toughness equal to your creature count, great with the previous elementals that we just looked at, and also fine for 4 mana to get 2 of them, right? And the Avenger is going to put out a ton of 0/1 tokens. Now that one might seem weird because you want the Avenger of Zendikar to stay in play. You don't want to evoke it unless you have things like Green Warden of Marasa, Muldrotha, and Horde of Notions. This is a major part of this deck. The Green Warden returns a bunch of stuff to hand to re-evoke, and you can evoke Green Warden. You can evoke Green Warden, sacrifice it, make the token copy, which then gets sacrificed right for 4 mana. And that does work, by the way. You would play it, return something, sacrifice it, return something, then make a token copy. If it came back from the graveyard, it exiles itself, but Ashling will just make a token copy. Muldrotha and Horde of Notions both just let you cast stuff from the graveyard. So that's great because you can evoke stuff for value for the enter the battlefield effects and then still get the creature out of the graveyard. And that makes sense with Avenger of Zendikar, right? Like if you had a Horde of Notions in play, you could evoke Avenger, get all the tokens twice, get the creature, get the tokens, sacrifice it, get the Ashling token with more plant tokens, and then from the graveyard, you can replay it, get even more tokens, right? So that's the idea of this whole deck. And then you also have things like Yarok, Omnath, Locust of Rage, Risen Reef, and these are just value engines on top of the value that you're already creating. You have Yarok that doubles all your triggers. Omnath sees all these elementals dying and does a ton of damage. He triggers on death, which will trigger with Evoke from Ashling, and Risen Reef is just going to draw a ton of cards, get a bunch of mana. It triggers on the creature entering and the token copy, by the way, of Ashling. So it's just, you can see the value, right? Now that you've seen this, looking at Ashling, that 4 mana Evoke starts seeming kind of crazy. It seems bad because you have to sacrifice the creature, but you have so many ways to get stuff back from the graveyard. You have so many things that the enter the battlefield effects are so powerful that losing the creature to get the ETB twice is totally worth it, right? So it's pretty cool. And there's plenty more we don't have time to talk about. There's more new cards that power up this archetype. There are more powerful elementals, including plenty that have evoke naturally. And there are some 5-color payoffs since this is a 5-color deck. So there's some, vivid and stuff like that. And yeah, if you want to play 5 colors with a lot of powerful enter the battlefield effects and ways to trigger them for cheap and trigger them multiple times, be sure to check out Dance of the Elements. Next up is Blight Curse, a Jund -1/-1 counters matters deck with Anti-Ul Curse Wretch as the commander. It is a 4-mana 4/4 with Ward, Blight 2. That means your opponent has to put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature they control in order to target it. And if they don't have a creature, then they just can't target it because they can't pay the ward cost. And it also says whenever a -1/-1 counter is put on a creature, any creature, you're going to draw a card if you control the creature, and if it's an opponent's creature, they're going to lose 1 life. So the whole idea with this is you just want to dish out tons of -1/-1 counters. You get benefit by drawing cards when you do it on your stuff, and you drain your opponent's lives when you put it on their stuff. The alternate commander is the Reaper King. Oh wait, no, it is the Reaper King no more. A 3 mana or up to 6 mana, depending on how you pay for the mana cost. 3/3, it puts a -1/-1 counter on up to 2 creatures when it enters, and then whenever a creature your opponent controls with a -1/-1 counter dies, you put it onto the battlefield under your control. So the idea with this, you want to just dish out a bunch of -1/-1 counters, then kill your opponent's stuff and get their things. You can only do that once per turn, but do note that with instant speed removal, you could do it multiple times per turn cycle. Not to mention like creatures die in combat, right? If your opponent attacks one of your other opponents and there's creatures with -1/-1 counters on them, you just get the creatures, right? So this is pretty self-explanatory. Jund, -1/-1 counters. A theme that definitely isn't very common, so there are a lot of unique things going on with this deck. We'll take a look at some new cards first. We have Village Pillagers, Sinister Gnarlbark, and Oft-Nabbed Goat. These are some of the more interesting ones. The Pillagers have Wither, meaning it will deal its damage in the form of -1/-1 counters, and then it's going to deal 1 damage to all of your opponent's creatures when it enters. So that's -1/-1 counter on everything, right? Because the damage that it deals is in -1/-1 counters. Then you make treasures when creatures with counters on them die. So first off, there's a board of tokens. This enters, wipes them all out, and just gives you tons of treasure. But this deck is so good at putting up -1/-1 counters that you're just going to get tons of mana. You're going to expect to get lots of mana with this thing, that's for sure. And then you have Gnarlbark, which blights 1 to draw a card every turn. Every turn, put a -1/-1 counter on your creature, draw. So even if you only target this with the blight, it's 4 cards for 3 mana over several turns. But also note that with Anti-Ul, you'll draw 2 cards per turn because she will also trigger when she sees the -1/-1 counter being placed. So with these two together, 2 cards per turn, that's not bad. And the Goat is a pretty crazy group hug type of card. So on each player's turn, they can pay 1 to gain control of it, and they'll draw a card and put a -1/-1 counter on it. I mean, who doesn't want to pay 1 to draw a card? But when they do that, they put the -1/-1 counter on it. So if you have your commander, they're going to lose 1. And then if you grab it back, you'll draw an additional card with your commander, because then you're putting a -1/-1 counter on your creature. And then if it dies, the owner will draw cards equal to the number of counters on it, and everyone will lose life equal to that amount. I think this is a really interesting design. It's just gonna circle around the table. Everyone's gonna want to draw cards, but it's gonna be draining their life. And then, if you have the Reaper, you also will get it back when it dies too, if it dies on an opponent's side, which is pretty funny. So it's a wacky card for sure. Let's talk about reprints though. You get things like the Scorpion God, Grim Puppet, Carnifex Demon. These are much more popular in these type of decks. You've probably seen them before. There's also, by the way, some very valuable cards in this deck. We don't get a lot of -1/-1 counter decks often, so but we don't talk about value. The God can dish out -1/-1 counters for 3 mana, and then it's another card draw engine. That's pretty cool. The Grim Puppet comes into play with -1/-1 counters, but he can dish them out, and you can load it up with blight counters and then send them elsewhere. So like for Sinister Gnarlbark, for example, you can blight onto the puppet to draw and then move the counter somewhere else, right? And then Auntie Ool will see you put the -1/-1 counter on your creature and draw an extra card, and then you can move it somewhere else where it'll drain one, because that's a counter being put on an opponent's creature. Not to mention you can just kill stuff doing this all the time. And then Carnifex Demon basically does the same thing. It's just a bigger body, bigger flying demon that can just move counters. You have more ways to ensure the board is full of counters too, by the way. You have like Everlasting Torment, Blowfly Infestation, Midnight Banshee. The first turns all damage into Wither. Every single bit of combat damage, your opponent's damage. If damage is dealt, it does it in the form of -1/-1 counters, which can be kind of terrifying with your commander. The Infestation is like the Ozolith for -1/-1 counters, kind of. Basically, if something with a counter on it dies, a -1/-1 counter, it moves somewhere else. And the Banshee just floods the board with -1/-1 counters every turn. Every single turn, you just dish out -1/-1 counters to all non-black creatures. You have a lot of black creatures in your deck, and then you have things like Grim Puppet, which will just be happy to soak up a counter and then move it, right? And then you have payoffs for these counters. In addition to your commander, you have Kolrath Knight, Necroskitter, another very valuable card. Hepatra. The Knight says creatures with counters on them can't attack or block, so I mean you could just brick the entire game with that. Necroskitter will return creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield when they die with counters. So just like the Reaper, if something with a counter on it dies, you get it, and you're very good at dishing them out and killing stuff. And Hepatra will just give you an army of Death Touch snakes whenever -1/-1 counters are placed, and works pretty well with Necroskitter, because if those Death Touch snakes kill stuff, then you get the stuff. And yeah, there's plenty more we don't have time to talk about. There's more new cards for this archetype. There's more classic cards that you're familiar with. There's even some reanimation stuff in this deck because, well, it has a habit of just killing everything on board, so why not reap the graveyard as well? And yeah, if you want to play a Jund -1/-1 counter deck that has a lot of ways to generate a ton of card advantage while wiping out the board constantly, be sure to check out Blight Curse. And that is it for our Lorwyn Eclipsed Commander decks. I will leave links to the complete deck list in the description below if you want to check those out. There's also sponsored Amazon affiliate links, though I encourage you to support a local game store if you have one. Also, be sure to let me know which deck you are most interested in the comments below. And in the meantime, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully this was useful, and I will see you in the next one.